Hello and welcome to Let's Review. Warhammer is one of those odd fandoms that still has a little bit of a stigma attached to it. Inaccurate though it may be, when most people think of a Warhammer fan, they imagine some specky nerd painting little figurines in their parents' basement. However, in the past few years, the Warhammer 40,000 brand has managed to expand very nicely into the realm of video games.
Although there are others that came before it, Dawn of War was what the Warhammer 40,000 universe needed in order to establish itself on the gaming scene. It laid the foundation that led to a general upswing in quality of 40k games, including numerous expansions and a sequel, as well as the excellent Space Marine and the fun, if flawed, PSP release Squad Command.
After the breakup of THQ due to financial difficulties, the Warhammer 40,000 license stopped being as exclusive as it had once been. As a result, many games were announced and released, including the rather lackluster Storm of Vengeance and the frankly bizarre Regicide. In addition, we also got Space Hulk. Originally released as a board game in 1989, Space Hulk has received a number of video game adaptations over the years. The 2013 release was the first to accurately transpose the gameplay of the board game, right down to virtual dice rolls. And has it survived the medium transfer? Well, let's start by looking at the gameplay. In Space Hulk, you command a squad of Space Marine Terminators as they battle Tyranid Genestealers in the cramped confines of old, crippled starships.
In each individual mission, you will be given at least one squad of Terminators, and in some missions you'll get two. For example, in this mission I'm commanding both Squad Lorenzo and Squad Gideon. Your Terminators can be equipped with a number of different weapon sets, so for example Sergeant Gideon has a Power Sword and a Storm Bolter, which is an excellent combination for both ranged and melee. Once things get into melee range, you are at a severe disadvantage, as the Genestealers roll 3 dice for every melee attack, while you roll 1. And you need to roll higher in order to win. As such, your best option is to place your squads on Overwatch, which will automatically target any Genestealer that comes into their line of sight. So for example, these Genestealers here are just out of his firing range. If I was to move him to here, he would be able to target this one. However, it would be a wiser move for me to pull him back, use up some of his action points, and use 2 more action points to place him into Overwatch. From there, he can cover anything coming from that direction, and anything approaching up here and coming along here. If I then select Brother Noctis, who is here just behind him, I can do the same. I back him up, and I place him into Overwatch.
They will fall.
Now he can't get a clean shot past Sergeant Lorenzo, but should Sergeant Lorenzo be killed, Brother Noctis can then engage and hopefully take out anything that gets past him. Brother Zale here, on the other hand, has a different weapon selection. He has a Heavy Flamer. Now the Heavy Flamer is exceptionally useful as an area denial weapon. If I select it, any square that's now on fire will be set on fire by the Flamer. So if I fire it, Genestealers can't pass through fire or it will kill them. So if anything spawns in from here, it's going to die instantly. If anything spawns from there, it'll be trapped until the fire burns out, which will be at the beginning of my next turn. The particular objective for this mission is to move the soldier equipped with the Cat, which is the cybernetic something or other, and get him from the deployment points here to the exit zone, which is down here. There are a number of varieties of mission, but they mostly regard either get your squad from one end of the map to the other, or sometimes defend a certain point until a certain number of Genestealers have been killed. So if I return to Brother Dino, since this area is blocked off and safe, I can advance him quite happily knowing he's covered. If I look at Brother Goriel here, it seems logical to me to turn him around so that he can provide covering fire from this angle, just in case anything manages to get past the Sergeant and Brother Noctis down there. So if I place him onto Overwatch, you will notice that I only have 1 action point left, but it requires 2 to go into Overwatch. For that, I will automatically use a command point. Command points are shared throughout the entire squad, and you roll for each one at the beginning of each turn. If you have a sergeant with you, right at the beginning of the turn you can re-roll it. So if you get a 1, for example, it's always worth re-rolling because you've got a pretty good chance of getting something slightly better. So I'll place him onto Overwatch. If I then consider my other squad, I have Sergeant Gideon here, who has a Thunderhammer and a Storm Shield. As such, he has no ranged attack, but has the best chance of all my men to actually survive melee with the Genestealers. So I leave him there at a critical choke point. If I place him into guard, that means if he loses the roll, he will automatically re-roll it.
Unbreakable fate.
And his Storm Shield and Thunderhammer, took me a moment to remember that, gives him a +2 bonus on each roll. We also have Brother Leon over here, who has an Assault Cannon, which has limited ammunition. You only get 10 shots, but it can also reload. However, you only get a single reload, so you have a maximum number of 20 shots. However, it has a much higher chance of killing than
Order
standard
confirmed.
Stormbolters.
Holding.
He is especially useful in Overwatch. Then we have Brother Valencio here, who again has a Storm Bolter and a Chain Fist. The Chain Fist is no more effective than the Power Fist, however, his
Securing
Storm Bolter
area.
is as useful as all the others, which is probably the most useful ranged weapon, simply because it never runs out of ammunition, whereas Flamers and the Assault Cannon do. So what I need to do is maneuver my units along here, get them to meet up with this squad here. So at the moment, the only vulnerable spot from which the Genestealers can approach is along here. So if I end the turn, I get the Genestealers. His Overwatch was successful and he killed that one. Unlike games like XCOM, you can fire consistently, providing your bolter doesn't jam. As such, Overwatch is the best way to take out large numbers of Terminators, or Genestealers rather. I'll be honest, it would be interesting to see a multiplayer mode in which you could actually face Terminators off against other Terminators, but to the best of our knowledge it doesn't exist. Right, you will notice there that I only rolled 2 CP, so it seems logical to re-roll it. And I got 2 CP again. Oh well. Since the range of your bolters is effectively unlimited, and the accuracy is not affected in any way by range, it's logical to back him off
The enemy
again.
will fall before me.
So now, each time they move, he has a chance to hit them. So if they reach this point, he can fire, and he will have a 30% chance to hit them. They move to here, he will have another 30% chance to hit them. Here and here, same again. The greater the length of time they're in the firing line, the better the odds are of them actually hitting them. Especially given that there is actually a bonus for when you've fired at an enemy multiple times. If you miss once, the percentage chance to hit them goes up to 50%, give or take.
Overwatch.
It seems logical to continue using Brother Zale
Path.
to hold this area, but there is no point in flaming this area with no Terminator, why do I keep saying that? With no Genestealers present. As such, I'm going to advance Brother Dino, and I will also advance Brother Goriel. Him I will place on guard
Weapons
on an
ready.
unlikely chance, since the Flamer cannot go into Overwatch. So, and if we let the turn continue,
The machine spirits guide
Sergeant
my
Gideon
fire.
faces off in melee and has the best chance of all my units to actually survive it. Sergeant Lorenzo there has a slightly better chance because of his +1 power sword, but if it comes down to melee attacks, he's not going to survive for very long, or he's unlikely to, rather. And that is basically the combat of Space Hulk. It's also worth noting that occasionally,
Objective
if I
lost.
maneuver him, he will also fire at these Genestealers if he can see them. However, he can't because that door is shut. As such, it's logical
My
to place him
aim
onto
is true.
Overwatch. If I then move Brother Goriel to there, and also place him onto Overwatch, that'll create a rather effective killing field for anything that comes in that room.
Holding position.
And that that is the combat of Space Hulk.
The single biggest problem I have with the gameplay is its lack of variety. In every mission, you fight Gene Stealers, and it's not until right near the end of the campaign that you encounter anything else, and in my case, that was only a single Broodlord. The game needed far greater enemy variety, and it's not like the 40k universe lacks for inspiration in that regard. Hell, I'm not even a particularly big Warhammer fan, but even I could come up with a potential list of enemies.
How about Tau Crisis Suits, Eldar Wraithguard, Chaos Obliterators, Orc Meganobs, Necron and Lichguard, Drunken Dwarves, or Spot the Bloody Hand Puppet?
Okay, I might have got a wee bit carried away with the last couple, but frankly, at least Spot here would have added a little bit of variety to the enemies. Admittedly, it wouldn't have made for the fairest fight in the world. No, you'd have horribly murdered all those Terminators, wouldn't you? Good boy. Within the 40k universe, fast and light travel is achieved by passage through a realm known as the Warp. The Warp is bloody terrifying, and quite often ships become lost in it. Sometimes, these ships meet up in the Warp and form together to create a conglomerate mass known as a Space Hulk. When one of these Hulks suddenly reappears, the Blood Angels chapter of the Space Marines send a force of Terminators on board to recover artifacts and their fallen brothers from a previous excursion to this Space Hulk. And really, that's basically all I can tell you about the story. Because that's kind of it. Surely there is more to it than that. Nope. That is not a story. That's the setup to a story. I know. While every mission has a briefing that tries to weave in a little bit of a larger campaign, it doesn't really work. I think what this game really needed was some cinematics in between the missions to flesh out these characters, let us get attached to them and really feel the horror of their situation. As it stands, the fact that every Marine has been named just feels wasted. It is disappointing, especially in a universe with such potential and history of quality. Did you just compliment 40k lore? Naturally. Well, it's maybe one of the most depressing science fiction universes ever created. It has enough variety to allow for almost limitless possibilities. Very true. To return to my earlier example, Dawn of War's campaign focused on capturing Gabriel Angelos and the pain he felt over the loss of his homeworld. This worked as the setting for a larger campaign, and it let you really feel for it. Space Hulk needed something like this. If it had actually let us see these Marines as something other than just moving figurines, I think it would have been a much better game for it. From a graphical standpoint, Space Hulk looks pretty good. The models for the Terminators are excellent, and the models for the Gene Stealers are, well, they're not as good, but they work fine. From the animation point of view, there's a couple of minor glitches in it, mostly relating to shots that clearly missed the enemies, somehow killing them, and shots that clearly hit them, somehow not killing them. It's minor enough that you won't really care. From a technical standpoint, it ran absolutely fine with no significant slowdown. However, there was at least one bug I encountered where enemies that should have been clearly visible to me weren't until I got right on top of them, which was somewhat annoying. The music for this game is suitably atmospheric with just the right levels of military bravado and outright horror. As for the voice acting, well, it's not bad. The voice actor who's providing your briefings is a little bit flat, but since he's meant to be a military briefer, I'm kind of okay with that. As for the quotes from the individual Marines, they all work, they're very lore-friendly, and they've all been post-edited to sound like they're coming from inside the armour. The only real problem I have in this regard is that it would have been nice to hear some additional quotes for the various specialised Marines, particularly the Librarian, who feels like he should have a completely different set of quotes to the rest of his battle brothers. It's a minor complaint, but it is something you should be aware of. So, do I like Space Hulk? Well, kinda. Should you buy it? I wouldn't recommend it, not at full price anyway. Space Hulk feels like the basis for a really good game. It's just too held back by the board game it's based from. If the designers had been willing to take more risks and add more things to it, I think we could have had something really interesting on our hands. As it stands, even if you're a 40k fan, I wouldn't recommend it unless you can catch it in a sale. And even then, I'd be tempted to wait. Full Control have recently announced their intentions to create a standalone expansion pack to Space Hulk, which they claim will add in war gear customization and squad customization, which should hopefully add for a bit more variety. Unfortunately, no announcements yet about any new enemies, but here's hoping. Right, now if you'll excuse me, I want to go examine the possibilities of building a working chainsword. I'll see you later.